August 7th, 1944. Near Avranches, France. Dawn. Fog clings to the river like torn gauze, drifting low over the water, swallowing the far bank. You can hear engines before you see them. Deep diesel growls of Sherman tanks idling in the trees. The metallic clatter of half-track shifting gears. Men stamping their boots in wet grass, waiting, watching the broken bridge ahead like it's a wounded animal blocking the road. Captain Robert H. Miller, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, kneels beside the riverbank with a pair of field glasses. He lowers them slowly. What's left of the bridge is worse than last night. Two concrete piers still stand, jagged and cracked. The center span is gone, blasted into the water by retreating German engineers. Steel girders stick up at crazy angles, twisted like snapped ribs. The river below runs fast and brown, swollen from summer rain, carrying chunks of rubble downstream. Behind Miller, an armored column from General Patton's Third Army stretches back through the hedgerows. They were supposed to cross here before sunrise, push east, chase the Germans before they can dig in again. Instead, everything is stopped. Lieutenant Frank Delaney, mud already up to his calves, jogs over. "Sir, tanks can't ford this. Too deep, too fast. We lose one in that current, it's gone." Miller nods. He already knows. He also knows something else. If this crossing fails, the whole advance stalls. Patton's breakout after Normandy has turned into a race. American armor racing east, German units scrambling to form new defensive lines. Every hour matters. Every river is a chance for the Germans to slow them down, to regroup, to bring up artillery and anti-tank guns. Miller looks back at the long line of vehicles. Fuel trucks, ammo carriers, ambulances, infantry packed into troop carriers, faces grey with exhaustion, eyes fixed on the water. They're not supposed to be here long. He turns to Delaney. "Get the platoons up. We're building a bridge." Now, Delaney hesitates. "Here, sir?" Miller's jaw tightens. "Here." Before they figure out we're stuck. The first shells start falling 10 minutes later. Not close at first, distant thumps. Then the sharp crack of incoming rounds as German artillery finds the river crossing. Dirt jumps from the far bank. Shrapnel whistles through the air, slicing branches overhead. Engineer trucks roar forward anyway. Men jump down before the engines even stop, hauling crates, beams, steel panels. This isn't a normal bridge construction. There are no cement mixers, no long-term plans. This is a Bailey Bridge job. A bridge that exists in pieces. Captain Miller runs to the lead truck and rips open a crate with a crowbar. Inside are steel lattice panels, each one about 10 feet long, stacked like giant pieces of an iron puzzle. The Bailey Bridge is British designed, simple and brutal and brilliant. No heavy machinery needed. Everything can be carried by hand, bolted together on site, slid across gaps on rollers. If the engineers can work fast enough. "Panel teams, forward," Miller shouts. "Get the rollers set on the near pier." Private Eddie Kowalski, 19 years old, from Chicago, grabs one end of a panel with 3 other men. It's heavier than it looks. The steel digs into his palms as they stagger forward, boots slipping in wet mud. Machine gun fire crackles from somewhere across the river. Bullets slap into the water, skipping off the surface like thrown stones. Kowalski ducks his head, keeps moving. He doesn't look at the far bank. He looks at the steel in his hands. The first frame of the bridge goes together on the near side, bolts hammered in with cold hands and shaking fingers. Artillery rounds are closer now. One lands 50 yards upstream, spraying water and rock across the riverbank. Sergeant Harold Red Jenkins, face streaked with grease and sweat, yells over the noise. Roll it, damn it!" They push. The steel frame slides forward on metal rollers inch by inch, reaching out over open water. No crane, no cables, just muscle. The river gurgles below, dark and fast. Miller stands on the pier, binoculars hanging useless at his chest, shouting corrections. "Left side higher, keep it level or she'll twist." If the frame twists, it collapses. And then they start over. Another shell hits closer. Wood splinters explode from the remains of the old bridge. Shrapnel slices through the air. One engineer drops, clutching his shoulder, blood already soaking through his sleeve. Medics drag him back without a word. No one stops, because stopping means staying here. And staying here means more shells, more casualties, more time for the Germans to regroup. The first span reaches the far pier with a metallic clang. Men cheer for half a second before Miller waves them silent. "That's just the nose," he shouts. "We need the full length before anything crosses." More panels, more frames, more weight. Kowalski's arms are numb now. He can't feel his fingers. He just keeps lifting, bolting, pushing, because everyone else is doing the same thing, and because the tanks are still waiting behind him. He glances back once. A Sherman commander stands half out of his turret, helmet tilted forward, watching the bridge grow piece by piece, like it's the only thing standing between him and the enemy. Because it is. Smoke drifts across the river as German mortars begin walking their fire closer to the construction site. The engineers are working in a fog of dust, smoke, and river mist, barely able to see the far bank. Miller checks his watch. They're already behind schedule. But the bridge is coming together, one section at a time, under fire, with nothing but steel, bolts, and men who cannot afford to slow down. And as the structure stretches farther across the river, something shifts in the air. Not relief, not yet, but the sense that the impossible might actually be happening. That the river might not stop them after all. The bridge is halfway across when the Germans finally adjust their aim. A mortar round slams into the near bank, close enough to knock two men flat. Dirt rains down. Someone screams for a medic. The river seems to recoil, rippling hard against the half-finished steel skeleton stretching over it. Captain Miller doesn't flinch. He steps onto the bridge frame itself, boots ringing on bare steel, grabbing the lattice to steady himself as another explosion booms upstream. "Keep pushing," he shouts. "If we stop, we die here." Lieutenant Delaney is already on the bridge, crawling forward with a wrench clenched in his teeth, tightening bolts as fast as his hands can move. The steel vibrates with every near miss, humming like a struck bell. Private Kowalski and his team shove another panel forward. Their shoulders burn, their breath comes in ragged gasps. Sweat mixes with river mist and grime until everyone looks the same, grey, soaked, unrecognizable. Machine gun fire intensifies from the far bank. Bullets smack into the steel rails, throwing sparks. One ricochets past Delaney's helmet, close enough that he feels the heat of it. He freezes for half a second, then tightens another bolt. The Germans know exactly what this bridge means. If it stands, the Americans keep coming. If it falls, the river becomes a wall. On the far side, German infantry scramble into new firing positions. Feldwebel Karl Metzger, crouched behind a fallen tree, watches the steel framework creep toward his bank through drifting smoke. "Amerikanische Ingenieure," he mutters. "Verrückt. Crazy but dangerous." He signals to the mortar team behind him. "Closer on the bridge." Another round thumps into the air. This one lands directly beneath the steel span, exploding in the water. The blast sends a geyser upward, soaking the underside of the bridge and rocking it violently. Men cling to the rails, boots slipping on wet metal. For a moment, everyone thinks it's going to collapse. It doesn't. Miller feels the vibration run through the frame and into his bones. He grips the steel harder. "Again!" he yells. "Move it again." And somehow, impossibly, they do. The final span reaches the far pier. Metal scrapes on concrete. Sergeant Jenkins throws his helmet into the air. "Contact! We've got contact!" But the bridge is not finished. Not yet. Now come the reinforcement beams, the decking, the weight-bearing supports that will decide whether this structure can actually hold 30 tons of moving steel. Because a bridge that can't take a tank might as well not exist. Artillery pounds the far bank now, American guns firing in support, trying to suppress the German positions. The sound is deafening, overlapping thunder, shaking the ground underfoot. Miller drops to his knees on the bridge and starts helping with bolts himself. His hands are bleeding, he doesn't notice. All he can think about is the first tank. If the first tank makes it, the rest will follow. If the first tank falls through, he doesn't finish the thought. 20 minutes later, the bridge is declared barely ready. Barely. Lieutenant Delaney jogs back to the armored column, waving frantically. "Bring up one Sherman only, slow and steady." A Sherman tank lurches forward, engine growling louder as it climbs out of the trees. Its tracks clank against the broken pavement of the old bridge approach, then pause at the edge of the new steel span. Inside the turret, Sergeant William Hargreave grips the controls, eyes locked on the narrow path ahead. No rails, no safety margin, just steel beams and open water. He inches forward. The bridge groans. Men hold their breath. The first track rolls onto the steel decking. The bridge dips slightly under the weight, flexing like something alive. Another foot, another. The tank is fully on the bridge now. Mortar fire erupts again from the far bank. Shells splash into the river beside the tank, sending columns of water crashing down onto the steel. Hargreave keeps moving, slow, steady. The bridge creaks but holds. When the tank reaches the far pier, men start shouting, cheering, crying, laughing all at once. Miller slumps against the lattice, chest heaving. But there is no time to celebrate, because now comes the real test. Trucks start crossing next ammo carriers, fuel tankers dot ambulances, each one heavier than the last. The engineers stay on the bridge, watching for cracks, loose bolts, shifting beams. Every vehicle that passes is a gamble. German fire doesn't stop, but it no longer matters the way it did before, because the crossing is open. And on the far bank, American infantry are already spreading out, returning fire, pushing the Germans back from their mortar positions. The stalled column begins to flow again. Like a river of steel and rubber and dust, Patton's advance, held up for hours by a single destroyed bridge, surges forward as if someone cut a rope. Captain Miller finally allows himself to step off the bridge, legs trembling. Delaney joins him, eyes bloodshot, uniform torn. "Sir," he says quietly, "they're through." Miller watches another Sherman rumble onto the far bank, guns swiveling, already searching for targets. "Good," he replies, "because this wasn't supposed to be a stop. It was supposed to be a speed bump." But the engineers are not done. They never are. Because ahead lie more rivers, more canals, more blown crossings, and every one of them is another chance for the Germans to slow the chase. And now, somewhere farther east, another bridge is already being wired with explosives. Waiting. The radio crackles before the last truck has even cleared the bridge. Static. Then a strained voice cutting through the noise of engines and gunfire. "Engineer Command, this is forward recon. Germans are pulling back to the Via Canal crossing. We saw demolition teams moving onto the span. Repeat, demolition teams on the bridge." Captain Miller grabs the handset. "How long?" "Hard to say, sir. But they're not waiting." Miller closes his eyes for half a second. Another river. Another choke point. Another chance for the Germans to slam the door. He turns to Delaney. "Get the gear loaded. We're moving." Delaney blinks. "Sir, half the platoon hasn't even rested." Miller is already walking. They can sleep when the war's over. The convoy surges forward again. Engineers mixed in among infantry and armor, racing down narrow French roads still littered with wrecked German trucks and abandoned equipment. Kowalski rides in the back of a deuce and a half, helmet resting against the metal wall, eyes half closed, hands still shaking from adrenaline. Every muscle in his body aches. Then the truck swerves hard. He snaps awake. Ahead, black smoke curls into the sky. The canal. The Via Canal bridge comes into view just as the first explosion goes off. Not enough to destroy it, but enough to make everyone's blood run cold. A blast blooms near the far abutment, sending debris into the water and cracking the stonework. The steel superstructure still stands, but smoke pours from beneath it. German demolition teams are already retreating from the span, sprinting for cover as American artillery starts pounding the far bank. Miller leaps from his truck before it fully stops. "Check that bridge," he shouts. "If it's standing, we save it. If it's gone, we build again." Engineers fan out, running toward the structure as bullets snap overhead. Kowalski follows Sergeant Jenkins toward the near pier, boots slipping on loose gravel. They reach the underside of the bridge just as another charge detonates. The blast lifts Kowalski off his feet and slams him into the embankment. His ears ring. For a moment, the world goes white. When his vision clears, Jenkins is dragging him by the collar. "Up, kid, you still breathing?" Kowalski nods, dazed, and stumbles upright. The bridge is still there, but not for long. Miller and Delaney crawl under the near span, staring up at the steel beams and shattered stone. Delaney points, charges on the center supports. If they fire those, the whole thing drops. Miller's mind races. If they try to remove the explosives, they risk triggering them. If they don't, the Germans will detonate remotely. There is no safe option, only fast ones. Cut the wires, Miller says. Delaney looks at him. Sir, now! Engineer teams scramble under the bridge, wire cutters in hand, while bullets punch into the embankment above them. Dirt showers down, shrapnel screams through the air. Kowalski crawls beside Jenkins, reaching up to snip a thick cable running along a beam. His hands are slick with sweat and river water. He cuts, nothing happens. He exhales. Then another blast erupts farther down the bridge, tearing apart part of the decking. Time is running out. German infantry reappear on the far bank, trying to hold off the Americans long enough to finish the job. Machine guns rake the near shore. One engineer goes down, hit in the leg, screaming. Miller grabs a wire himself, yanking it free with both hands. Sparks fly. Somewhere above them, a tank gun fires, shaking the entire structure. The bridge groans. Delaney shouts, "We got most of them!" But not all. Miller knows what that means. All it takes is one. He scans the beams, eyes catching on a small charge wired into a support column, half hidden by smoke. "Cover me," he yells. Before anyone can stop him, he scrambles forward, climbing onto the damaged pier, exposed to the far bank. Bullets snap past his head. He reaches the charge, fingers fumbling with the wire. It's thicker than the others. He pulls out his knife and starts sawing through it. The wire finally gives. Miller drops flat, just as a burst of machine gun fire tears through the concrete inches above him. He doesn't wait. He crawls back under the span, heart hammering. For a moment, nothing happens. Then Delaney lets out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. That was the last one. But the bridge is badly damaged. Cracked supports, blown decking. Twisted steel. It won't carry tanks. Not like this. Miller wipes blood from his forehead where he's been grazed by flying stone. "We're not losing this crossing," he says. "Not today." Delaney stares at the ruined span. "Sir, we'd need a full bridge to replace this." Miller looks at the trucks rolling up behind them. The same trucks that brought the Bailey Bridge parts to the river that morning. "We have one," he says. "We just have to build it on top of what's left." Delaney's eyes widen. "Under fire?" Miller doesn't answer. He's already shouting orders. And the engineers, exhausted, shaking, filthy, pick up their tools again. Because the road east is still blocked, and the clock is still ticking. They don't even clear the wreckage first. There isn't time. Instead, the engineers lay rollers and steel panels directly onto the shattered remains of the old bridge, turning twisted German demolition into a foundation for American speed. Smoke still drifts from the blast craters. The smell of explosives hangs in the air, sharp and bitter. Miller stands in the open, waving teams into position. "Panel carriers, move! Stringers next!" We're building straight across. Artillery from the American side hammers the far bank, shells crashing into German firing positions to keep their heads down. But sniper fire still cracks across the canal, bullets whining off steel beams and slamming into sandbags hastily piled along the approach. Kowalski hauls a panel forward with 3 others, legs trembling, arms numb. He can barely feel the weight anymore. His world has shrunk to 10 feet of steel, and the man in front of him. They slam the panel into place. Bolts fly in, hammers ring. It feels less like construction and more like battlefield surgery, stitching steel onto a dying structure and praying it holds long enough to save the patient. German resistance on the far bank begins to weaken as American infantry push forward under covering fire. Rifle shots grow less frequent. The mortar rounds stop. But that doesn't mean safety. Unexploded charges could still be buried in the rubble. One wrong step could set them off. No one mentions it. No one needs to. Delaney crawls under the span again, checking the cracked supports. "Sir, these piers are barely standing," he calls. "If a tank hits this too hard, the whole thing could pancake." Miller looks at the growing steel frame above them. "We don't need perfect," he replies. "We need passable." Another panel locks into place. The bridge is rising again. Faster this time, angrier, as if the engineers are personally offended by the river, the Germans, and the laws of physics. An hour later, the new span is finished. It's ugly, bent steel. mismatched sections, decking patched over scorched beams. But it stretches from one bank to the other, and it might hold. Miller steps onto the bridge and jumps once hard. The structure shudders but stays put. He nods. Bring up a truck. A supply truck rolls forward slowly, driver pale, knuckles white on the steering wheel. The front wheels ease onto the bridge. The decking creaks, metal groans. Dust drifts down from the damaged beams underneath. The truck makes it across. Then another, then an armored half-track. Cheers break out again, rough and exhausted. But the true test still waits behind them. The tanks. A Sherman rumbles forward, same as before, cannon pointed straight ahead, engine roaring. Miller raises his arm. Slow. Don't stop. The tank climbs onto the steel. The bridge dips lower than it did at the river. A crack runs through one of the old concrete supports beneath, loud enough that several men flinch, but it doesn't give. The tank crawls forward inch by inch until its tracks bite into dirt on the far bank. The crossing is open again, for the second time in one day. As the armored column surges forward, Miller finally allows himself to sit down on the canal bank, back against a crate of bolts. His hands are shaking now that he no longer has to pretend they aren't. Delaney drops beside him, helmet off, hair matted with sweat. "Sir, that was insane." Miller exhales slowly. "That's what they pay us for." Across the bridge, the thunder of engines fades eastward, chasing the retreating German columns. The engineers stay behind, reinforcing the structure, widening the deck, making sure supply convoys can keep flowing through the night. Because this isn't just about tanks. It's about fuel, food, ammunition, everything that keeps an army moving. And armies that stop moving start losing. Kowalski sits with his back against the truck, staring at his hands. They are raw and bleeding where gloves tore hours ago. He flexes his fingers, amazed they still work. Jenkins drops down beside him and hands him a canteen. "You did good, kid." Kowalski manages a weak smile. "Didn't feel good." Jenkins chuckles softly. "Yeah, it never does." They watch convoy after convoy roll across the bridge, headlights flickering in the gathering dusk. The road east stays open, and somewhere far ahead, German commanders are realizing that another river, another bridge, another carefully planned delay has failed. Again, but the engineers know something the rest of the army often forgets. Tomorrow there will be another crossing, another explosion, another race against demolition charges and gravity and enemy fire. And when that happens, it won't be infantry or tank crews who decide whether the advance continues. It will be men with steel panels, wire cutters, and shaking hands, standing in the middle of a river. Darkness settles over the canal, but the work does not stop. Headlights are blacked out, reduced to narrow slits of dim light. Lanterns are shielded with helmets and jackets. The engineers move like shadows, tightening bolts, hammering loose decking, stacking extra supports wherever the structure still groans under weight. Convoys roll across in an unbroken stream. Fuel trucks, artillery tractors, ambulances heading west, wounded soldiers lying silent inside. Every vehicle that passes is proof that the bridge is holding, and proof that the German attempt to slow the advance has failed. Captain Miller stands beside a makeshift table of crates, writing quick reports by flashlight. His uniform is stiff with dried mud and sweat. He hasn't eaten since before dawn. A runner jogs up, breathless. "Sir, Corps headquarters says German units are falling back again. They didn't expect us to be across the canal this fast." Miller nods without looking up. They never do, because speed is not supposed to look like this. It isn't supposed to be men carrying steel under fire, rebuilding what was destroyed only hours before. But that is exactly what is happening, again and again across France. Several miles east, German command posts struggle to understand how American armor keeps appearing, where roads and bridges should have stopped them. Major Hans Richter, Wehrmacht logistics officer, stares at his map in disbelief. Red pencil marks show every river crossing that was supposed to delay the Allied pursuit. Each one crossed, each one faster than predicted. "They should still be west of the canal," he mutters. An aide shrugs helplessly. "They rebuilt the bridges, Herr Major." Overnight, Richter closes his eyes. He knows what that means. Every delay that fails costs the German army time it does not have. Time to regroup, time to reinforce, time to build real defensive lines. Without that time, retreat becomes collapse. Back at the canal, Kowalski finally slumps onto the grass beside the road, helmet tipped over his eyes. He is asleep in seconds, despite the rumble of engines and the distant thud of artillery. Jenkins lets him rest. They all know it won't last long. Engineers rarely get long breaks when an army is advancing, because every mile forward creates another problem that needs solving. Just before dawn, Miller receives new orders. Another crossing ahead, smaller river this time, but the bridge is already destroyed. He folds the message and looks at Delaney. "Load up," Delaney sighs. Of course it is. They don't even dismantle the temporary camp. Grates are thrown back onto trucks, panels are stacked. Tools are grabbed and shoved into packs. Within minutes, the engineer column is rolling east again, chasing the sound of gunfire, chasing the front line, chasing the next obstacle. As the sun rises, they arrive to find the next bridge reduced to rubble, smoke still rising from fresh demolitions. Infantry are pinned down on the far bank. Tanks wait behind them, and the river flows quietly in between, as if nothing unusual is happening at all. Miller steps down from his truck, surveys the scene, and makes the same decision he has made all day. Get the Bailey parts, we're building here. No hesitation, no debate. Just routine, dangerous, exhausting life-or-death routine. For the soldiers waiting to cross, the bridge will be a brief moment of tension and then a blur of steel under tracks. For the generals, it will be a line on a map, a successful advance, another step closer to Germany. But for the engineers, it will be hours of lifting, hammering, crawling, cutting wires, and working under fire so others can keep moving. Their victories are not marked by captured cities or destroyed enemy divisions. They are marked by something simpler, a road that does not end. Kowalski wakes to Jenkins shaking his shoulder. "Up, kid, river's waiting." Kowalski groans, then sits up, blinking at the grey light of morning and the dark line of water ahead. Another bridge, another race. He gets to his feet, muscles screaming, and grabs the nearest steel panel. Because stopping is not an option. Not for him, not for any of them. And somewhere behind them, trucks continue to cross the bridges they built hours earlier, carrying the supplies that will fuel battles yet to be fought. Bridges no one will remember, built by men whose names will never make headlines, but without whom the war does not move forward at all. By the third river in 2 days, the engineers barely react to the sound of explosions anymore. It has become a pattern. German demolition teams blow the bridge. American engineers arrive, steel goes up, armor rolls across. The chase resumes. What was once desperate improvisation has turned into grim efficiency. Miller times the next construction with his watch. 43 minutes from first panel to first truck. Faster than the last crossing. Delaney shakes his head. "Sir, we're getting good at this. That can't be healthy." Miller allows himself a tired smirk. "War's never healthy, Lieutenant, but it rewards speed. And speed is exactly what the Allied advance has become, not a careful crawl of flood. German commanders had planned to trade space for time, blow bridges, destroy roads, force the Americans to stop, regroup, and slowly grind forward. But they miscalculated one crucial factor. They assumed rebuilding would take days. It takes hours, sometimes less. And every hour saved denies the Germans the chance to organize proper defenses. Tank crews who expect to find a river barrier instead find American Shermans already crossing into their positions. Infantry units retreating to what should be a safe line discover that the line no longer exists. It has been erased by steel and sweat. At the latest crossing, Kowalski and Jenkins work alongside men from another engineer company, trading tools, shouting over the noise. One of the newcomers laughs as he slams in a bolt. "Hell, I built 3 of these in Italy last year. Thought I was done with rivers." Jenkins grins back. "Rivers ain't done with you." The joke is thin, but it's enough. Because humor is one of the few things that makes the constant danger feel manageable. Miller walks the length of the new bridge after it opens, checking every joint, every beam, every support. He knows tanks are pounding across behind him, but he still inspects like the structure might fail the moment he stops looking. Delaney joins him at the far end. "Sir, headquarters says armored spearheads are already 10 miles past this point." Miller exhales slowly. 10 miles. That means another river soon, another road, another place where someone will try to stop them. But it also means something else. The Germans are running out of places to run. The engineers load up again. Again. By now, the men move like machines, performing tasks almost without speaking. Panels lifted, bolts tightened, rollers placed, frames pushed. It is muscle memory forged under shell fire. But even machines wear down. One corporal collapses beside the truck, simply sitting down in the dirt, eyes unfocused. Miller orders him into the passenger seat and assigns someone else to his spot. There is no ceremony, no speeches, just rotation and replacement, the same system that keeps tanks and trucks in the fight. Men are part of the logistics too. Late in the afternoon, the sky darkens with incoming rain. The riverbanks turn slick, mud sucks at boots. The next bridge site is worse than the others. Wide water, steep banks, limited cover. German guns are already firing from the far side. Miller studies the terrain, jaw clenched. "This one's going to hurt," Delaney says quietly. Miller nods. "Then we better be quick." As the first panels go down, German artillery finds its range. Shells crash into the near bank, throwing mud and debris over the engineers. One explosion flips a truck onto its side, scattering crates across the road. Kowalski and Jenkins dive behind the wreckage, breathing hard. Jenkins looks at Kowalski, eyes wide but steady. "Still want that desk job after the war?" Kowalski laughs, breathless, "Only if the desk doesn't explode." They run back into the open. Because the bridge is not finished, and unfinished bridges get people killed. Under heavy fire, the Bailey frame crawls across the water, panel by panel, just like before. Miller stands at the edge, shouting corrections, refusing to leave the open ground even as explosions walk closer. A shell lands so near that the blast knocks him flat. Delaney reaches him, dragging him behind a truck. "Sir, you're bleeding." Miller touches his face, looks at the blood on his hand. "Not important," he says, pushing back to his feet. "Is the span holding?" Delaney nods. "Yes, sir. Then keep building." And they do, because nothing else makes sense. Because stopping is not in the vocabulary of an army in pursuit. Because somewhere ahead, German forces are trying desperately to form a line that keeps vanishing behind them. Not crushed by tanks, not overrun by infantry, but erased by bridges that should not exist. The bridge is still wet with rain when the message finally arrives. A motorcycle courier skids to a stop near the engineer trucks, boots splattered with mud, goggles streaked with grime. He tears off his helmet and shouts over the engines, "Message for Captain Miller, from Armored Command." Miller jogs over, breath steaming in the cool air. The courier hands him a folded slip of paper, already damp from rain. Miller reads it once, then again. Delaney watches his face change, the tension easing just slightly. "What is it, sir?" Miller looks up, eyes tired but sharp. "They broke through, hard. German rearguard never had time to set up proper defenses. Armors pushing straight through their full back line." Delaney exhales. So all this, it actually mattered. Miller nods slowly, every minute of it. Because this is what the engineers never see directly. They don't storm towns, they don't chase enemy units across open fields, but their work shapes every battle that follows. And now, finally, there is proof. The bridges they built under fire are not just keeping traffic moving. They're tearing holes in German retreat plans. Across the river, American tanks are already advancing into territory that should have been defended, catching German units in the middle of relocating, half dug in, half packed to move again. Confusion spreads, orders change. Retreat turns into rout, and it all traces back to crossings that never slowed the pursuit the way they were supposed to. Kowalski doesn't hear any of this. He's too busy tightening bolts on the far end of the bridge, rainwater dripping from his helmet, hands numb and red. Jenkins claps him on the shoulder. "Looks like we're winning, kid." Kowalski shrugs weakly. "Good. Maybe they'll stop blowing bridges." Jenkins snorts. "Don't count on it." Miller finally allows himself a moment to breathe. He steps away from the bridge, standing alone near the riverbank, listening to the water and the distant rumble of artillery. For the first time since dawn, the crossing feels secure, not just built held. Delaney joins him quietly. You think they'll ever write about this stuff, sir? Bridges engineers all of it. Miller watches a convoy of trucks roll across, their tires rattling over steel decking. They'll write about the battles, he says. The tanks, the cities, maybe the generals, he pauses. But if they get those right, then they're already writing about us. Whether they know it or not, because none of that happens without roads that keep going. Another order comes in, not urgent, not desperate, routine. Engineers are to stay in place for the night, reinforce the structure, prepare it for heavier traffic. For the first time in 2 days, they are not immediately racing to the next river. Then drop where they stand, some laughing, some just staring at the sky. Rations are passed around, cigarettes are lit. Someone produces a harmonica and plays softly near the trucks. The sound drifts across the water, thin but steady. War feels almost distant for a few minutes. Kowalski sits with his back against a crate, chewing on cold rations, eyes half closed. He thinks about how close he came to not seeing this night, about the explosion that knocked him down, about the wires he cut under the bridge, about how tomorrow or the next day it will all start again. But for now, the bridge stands, and the army is still moving. Miller finishes his report and finally sits, shoulders sagging with exhaustion. He knows the Germans will keep trying, blow more crossings, block more roads. But now he also knows something else. They cannot do it fast enough. Not against men who can turn piles of steel into working bridges before the smoke even clears. Not against an advance that no longer pauses long enough to be stopped. The river keeps flowing. The war keeps moving east. And somewhere ahead, another bridge is already marked on a map as a point of resistance. A place where the Germans hope to buy time. A place where they will learn again that time is no longer on their side.